welcome to Monday's edition of Cracking the Cryptic. Yesterday's puzzle on the channel was inspired by the great Phistomefel, and this puzzle today has also been inspired by Phistomefel. This is Undar Beyond's version of Spiral Galaxies, and very few people seem to have solved it so far. It was published yesterday, I think, on Logic Masters Germany. It's tentatively rated at 5 stars out of 5 for difficulty, but it's a mark of respect, I think, for the regard with which I hold this 16-year-old phenom from Hong Kong, that I just want to try the puzzle. I've had such pleasure from solving his last two puzzles that, I couldn't wait. So this one is the one I'm going to try and do for you today. A quick reminder. Mark and I have been working on a new puzzle hunt. Now, we are very, very excited about this. Honestly, the start of this puzzle hunt, if you're of a certain mind, you will love it. You will love it. It is a doozy. What we're planning to do is to release the puzzle hunt as and when we manage to meet 1,500 patrons on Patreon. We had an incredible response last night. And thank you all very much, those of you who decided to join the channel. We do really work hard to make sure that our patrons get some amazing extra content. There's always a monthly bonus puzzle. There's always a video on how to solve that puzzle. And we do, we've been publishing lots of bonus puzzles there and also bonus solves there as well. So, I hope that our existing patrons would agree that it's pretty good value. And as I say, with this puzzle hunt in the offing, let's hope we reach 1,500 soon. Now let me tell you the rules of this puzzle. This is another of Undar Beyond's explorations of this idea he's had about creating sort of lines in the grid, and the clues giving the sum of the cells sandwiched between the maximum and the minimum numbers in the lines. So let me read the rules. Right, so normal Sudoku rules apply. The points shown in the grids are the centres of point-symmetrical galaxies. Now, a galaxy is basically a line with a 1 cell width, and it must contain at least 3 cells, and the line cannot touch itself or form a loop. So if we look at this, let's look at the 31 clue. That's enormous. So, a possible version of this would be, it has to be symmetrical. So actually, I'm probably drawing one that is completely impossible now. So something like that, for example, that is symmetrical around the central circle, and we'd have to make sure that between the highest and the lowest digits on this line, the cells sum to 31. The galaxies cannot overlap. As I say, the numbers nearest to the point, so the ones associated with each of these dots, show the sum of the numbers between the smallest and the largest number of the galaxy. Numbers cannot be repeated along galaxy lines, and not every cell in the grid has to be part of a galaxy. Okay, so that's what we know. That the reason that last rule is in there is that sometimes in classic Spiral Galaxy, the logic problem, you have to fill the whole grid with galaxies. But in the Sudoku versions that we've seen so far from Phistomefel and now from Undar Beyond, that is not necessary. So do have a go at the puzzle yourselves. I can't recommend this setter too highly to you. To play the puzzle, you click on the link under the video. And with that, let's get cracking. Now, what I normally try and do with these puzzles is to, let's do some colouring in. I'll get the colours wrong, so you'll have to forgive me, but I'll try and make them as distinct as possible across boundaries. So this 6, you can see there's a circle dividing the 2 cells, so these 2 cells definitely have to be part of the 6th clue. But in fact, the 6th clue is going to have to be larger than this, isn't it? Because we need the cells sandwiched between the 1 and the 9 to add up to 6. So we can't have any 2-cell regions. I remember that from the rules now I think about it. Now, this cell, let's look at this cell. So this cell, you can see it can't turn left. It can't take this square, because if it did, its symmetrical counterpart would be this square, and we know that's part of the 6. So the 31 has to go vertically. Now it clearly is not large enough yet to have 31 cells summing to 31 sandwiched between its smallest and its largest digit, so it needs to grow larger. Now, what shall we do with this? Oh, perhaps actually the better way to think about it is what should we do with the 6? The 6 is bounded on this side now because the symmetrical counterparts of these two squares rotated around this dot in the middle of the 6 are those two squares. So neither of these two squares can be taken. The 6 has to keep growing. So now the 31 is bounded on that side completely. If it tries to take one of these cells, its symmetrical counterpart hits the 6. So it's got to keep going vertically. Okay, so the 31 has now run into this 20 clue at the top. I'll make that one blue. So it's got to turn. You can see if we stop at this point with the 31 galaxy, even if we put the highest and the lowest digits in the extreme cells, those three squares can't add up to 31. We can't make even 9 plus 8 plus 7 is only 24. And of course, whenever you put a 9 in one of these galaxies, it is axiomatically the highest digit in the galaxy. Therefore, it has to be, you know, the crust of the sandwich rather than the filling of the sandwich. So this 31 has to grow larger, but this square would be impossible because the rotational least symmetrical equivalent of this square around this circle is that square which is on the 6. So we can go to here. Someone appears to be doing some industrial lawn mowing outside my window. Hopefully you can't hear that on the microphone. Now, okay, now let's keep focusing on the 31 clue. Can these central cells in the 31 clue add up to 31? Can we make 5 cells add to 31? Well, the answer is no, because given we can't use a 9 in the sum, we've got to use 8, 7, 6, 5 and 4. They would be the biggest digits we could put into those 5 cells. And they add up to 30, which is a bit of a suspicious number, isn't it? This is clearly designed to make us realise that this cannot be the extent of the 31 cage. It needs to keep growing. Now, it can't take this square, look, because that square's rotational equivalent is that square, which we know is part of this 25 region. I'll make that purple. So it's got to take that square. So those two squares complete the 31 cage. And I say complete it, and that's because it's now 9 cells large, so it can't get any bigger. So it's 9 cells large, and it contains, therefore, all of the digits from 1 to 9. And therefore, the 1 and the 9 will be the highest and lowest digits along the line, and we have to put cells summing to 31 between those cells. So, this is quite interesting. We know that the numbers 1 to 9, if we add them all up, we get 45. Now, if we add up 1 and 9, we get 10. And in between the 1 and the 9, we have to put cells summing to 31. So 10 plus 31 is 41. So there is a 4 that is outside the sum in this cage. Now, Undar Beyond, I have done your puzzles before, and you are very devious. And here you are being very devious again, aren't you? Because if we know that there is a 4 outside the sum in the 31 cage, where can the 4 go? It either goes in this square or this square. Whoops, one of those two squares is a 4. Now, the thing that attracts my attention there is that square. Because whichever one of these is a 4, I can't put a 4 in this cell. Therefore, this galaxy here, let's think about this galaxy actually. The galaxy, however this is formed, you can see it can never take this square because the rotational equivalent of this square here around this circle is off the grid. So this, which has to be at least of size 3, is going to just form a line. Now, how many cells is the line? can it be just 3 cells? Well, the answer is no now, because if it's just a 3-cell galaxy, the central cell would be the sum of the cell, would be the answer to the clue, because it would be between 2 digits, which would be the lowest and the highest digits. But this square can't be a 4. So this has to be larger than a 3-cell galaxy. So it's got to be at least a 5-cell galaxy. I will make that galaxy green. Oh, and in fact it is a 5-cell galaxy because the 25 cage bounds it. Look, the 25 cage can't take these 2 squares because rotationally that hits the 31 galaxy, so it must go vertically. And that, look, limits the extent of our 4 cage galaxy, whatever we want to call it. Now look, this 25 has to grow larger now, because if we stop here, the cells that could be sandwiched would only be a domino, and you can't make 2 cells add to 25, so this needs to get bigger. If this cell's in the galaxy, its symmetrical counterpart is off the grid, so it's not. If this cell's on the galaxy, its symmetrical counterpart is on the 4 cage, so that square must be, and in fact that's it then. It can't take any more squares because that one would take us off the grid. So the 25 is done, and those 4 squares therefore have to add to 25, because we can't make 3 squares add to 25. So they have to be, they have to be 8, 7, 6 and 4. That's the only way I can make 4 digits add up to 25, because I know I need the 8 in the sum, and therefore the 9 is going to be in the boundary. If I try and not have an 8 in the sum, 7, 6, 5 and 4 obviously doesn't add up to enough. And as soon as we know, so there's a 9 in one of those 2 squares. Now, so the 4 galaxy now, where does the 4 go along here? It can't go at the end, because then it can't be sandwiched. It can't go here because of our logic with these 4s. So it's in one of those 2 cells. The 20 galaxy. Look, I've not completed this one either. Well, this one's going to have to go here and here, look. And we can't make those 2 squares sum to 20, so it's got to go further, which means it has to take that square and that square. 2, 3, 4. Right, okay, so now what do we look at next? The 15 cage here, that, I'll make that blue as well, because this blue's probably not going to reach down as far as this blue. Now this galaxy is interesting. This galaxy is very interesting because it can't be more cells than 4, because you can see it can't take this square because the reflection is onto the red galaxy, so it must take one of these 2 cells. And whichever one it takes, that's the last one it can take, because it needs to form a line. So it can't, for example, take these 6 cells. So these 2 cells have to sum to 15, and we can't include a 9, because if we include a 9, then we'd have to have a 10 to bound the 9, and you can't put 10 in a Sudoku, so this has to be 7 and 8. There has to be a 9 in this galaxy. So there's a 9 either up here or up here. I wondered if that was going to give us an X-wing or something over here, but it doesn't. Nearly does with this 9 here, but the counterpart of this 9 is down there. It's not in this row. That can't be a 7 or an 8. Okay, now I am really stuck. maybe the 6 cage. Let's have a think about the 6 cage. So the 6 cage could have a 2 and a 4 in the middle of it. Can't have a 1 and a 5 in the middle of it, or it could just have a 6 on its own in the middle of it. I don't think these... Just wondering if these 4s somehow impact. I can't quite see how that works. I was just sort of imagining there was a 4 here, because you can see whatever you put in here, it actually eliminates 2 of the strands in the middle row, because you can't repeat a 4 in a galaxy. So a 4 here would remove a 4 from those squares and those squares and force a 4 into there, which in turn would force a 4 into the 20 cage, because we couldn't repeat a 4 in the grey. Similarly this way around, if this is the 4, there would have to be a 4 over here. And then that could be the 4, couldn't it? One of those two would have to be a 4. Oh, actually, maybe I'm not meant to be thinking about the 4s. Maybe I'm meant to be thinking about the 1s and the 9s in this grey. Actually, that's interesting. So if this was a 1, we know that there's a 1 or a 9 in this domino, because there can only be one cell outside the sandwich. So if there's a 1 in here, then there's a 1 in here, then there's a 1 in one of those two squares. And if and if there's a 9 in one of these two, there's a 9. So there is definitely a 1 or a 9 in one of those two squares. And then this way round, if this was a 1 in one of those. Yeah, no. This is important. This is important because, look, whether it's a 1 or a 9 in here, let's just put a 9 in just for the sake of exposition. Right, 9 now can't go in those squares, so there's a 9 over here. Now we then need to put a 9 in one of these 3 squares in box 8. It can't go in the grey square because this starts with a 9 in the greys already. So it has to be in one of those 2 squares. But if we try and put the 9 here, look, it shifts the 4 in this galaxy away from it. But the 9 must bound the 4. It must be next to the 4 in this galaxy. So this doesn't work. And it works exactly the same way if we switch this for a 1. We're still shifting the 4 away from the cell that must bind it in the galaxy. So this is not right. Well, it is right. It is right, but what it means is that whatever the digit is, the 1 or the 9 we put in these 2 squares, has to appear in this square. There is a 1, 9. This square can only be a 1 or a 9 because we can't put the 1 or the 9 here. So there's a 1, 9 here and a 1, 9 in one of those 2 cells. Now, hang on. If there's a 1 or a 9 in one of these 2 cells, then how do we make this 20 total work? Well, the answer is we can't make it work if the galaxy is 6 cells large. Again, if this was a 1 and this 20 galaxy is fixed at 6 cells large, how do we make 20? We can't, because the maximum size of the sandwich we could use would be 2 cells. If I make that the 9, 2 cells can't add up to 20, and it's obviously the same exact thing if we, oops, I didn't mean to do that at all. If I try the 1 here, on the other hand, it would be these 2 squares that have to add to 20. So this galaxy has to grow larger. Okay, so it has to grow larger. Which way does it grow larger? So it could do that, Or it could, I think, do that as well. That is annoying. How do we tell which of those is correct? I wonder if I meant to look at this 11 cage as well. The 11 cage takes those two squares. I'll make that purple because this purple can't connect to this purple. Now the 11 cage works the same as the 15 cage, look. It has to be 4 cells large. So it could take one of these cells, either this one or this one, and that will have a reflection. But it can't take both because it needs to form a line, and it can't take this square because that reflects off the edge of the grid. So, what does this mean? It means that it means these two squares have to sum up to 11. They are going to be the centre of their galaxy. Right, this is important as well. The 20 cage now suddenly has more power, because how do we make 20 in 3 cells? We know this is going to grow and become bigger by 1 cell. Let's do it like this, just for the sake of exposition. This is now an 8-cell galaxy, but we know that wherever we put the 1 or the 9, the furthest away we can put the other boundary is going to create a 3-cell sandwich, either here or here. One of these sets of 3 cells has to add up to 20, and we can't use a 9 as the sandwich filling, so it's going to have to be 5, 7 and 8. Now, yeah, this is good. This is good. So can it be these 3 squares? Can these 3 squares be 5, 7 and 8? Well, now how do I make 11 work? I can't use 5, 6, 4, 7 or 3, 8. These 2 squares would have to be 2 and 9, and we can't use 9 as a sandwich filling. So these squares are not 5, 7 and 8, and therefore these squares are 5. I need to get rid of those. I don't know that's true, but I know these 3 squares are the sandwich filling. These are 5, 7 and 8. This one is not 1 and 9, therefore this is a 1 or a 9. That goes there. 5, 7, 8. Oh, this must be important, surely. So there's a boundary on one of these 2 squares. Now. Oh, hang on. Where do we put a 4 in column 5? If these can't be a 4, which they can't be now, and we know the greys have got 4s in the perimeter, not in any of the central cells, this square can't be a 4. That is the only valid position for 4. That means this isn't a 4, which means that is a 4. Oh, this guy's so good. Now we get to place the 1s and the 9s. This has to be a boundary. Therefore, because we know 4 is the only cell outside the sum, this must be a boundary. That gives us a 1-9 pair look in this row. This must be massive. How do I make more progress here? Oh, one thing I can do, look. I know that there's a 9 bounding this 15 cage, or 15 spiral galaxy. That 9 can't be in either of those 2 cells now. So there must be a 9 in one of those 2 cells. That means that's not a 9. That must be a 9. This must be a 1, 2 or a 3 because it has to be lower than the 4. 9, 9. There must be a 9 here by Sudoku. By Sudoku, look, 1. Where does 1 go in those 6 cells? We can't put a 1 in either of those 2 squares because it's too far away from the 4. The 1 must bound the 4 if there's a 1 in this cage, so it would have to be in one of those 2 squares. So in fact we know there is no 1 in the greens. So the 1 must be hidden away in the corner. Oh, now we're getting somewhere. Now we're getting somewhere, because this 4 means there's no 4 in the reds. So this is not a 2-4 pair. It can't be a 1-5 pair because you can't include a 1 in the sandwich. So this has to include a 6, and the 6 has to be in one of the central positions. Surely that's important. Oh, good grief. It's just, I get such pleasure from doing this guy's puzzles. They are just lovely, the intricacy of them. And it's very linear. You have to spot the sort of next particular path that he has in mind. Otherwise, you'll just be here all day. Now, one of those two squares has to be a 4 by Sudoku. Look. 6s. Here's something. Here's some geometry. The 31 cage has 9 cells, so it includes all of the digits. But this square sees almost all of the digits. It sees these 3 in the cage, it sees these in its column, and this can't be a 5, 7 or an 8. So this square has to be the 5, whatever's in that square has to be mirrored in this square. And there's a 7, 8 there, so this has to be a 5. Oh, good grief. So that's a 5. Yeah, okay, now this is interesting here as well. This is weird what's going on, but look, there's a 7 or an 8 in this square, and there's a 7 and an 8 in these squares. So if this is an 8, for example, it rules 8 out from those squares, and this pair rule out 8s from those squares, so the 8 would be shifted into the corner of this box. And obviously if it's a 7, the logic is identical. So this square has to be a 7 or an 8. Oh, and now the 6 is look what the 6 does now to this box. The 6 has to go here. It's the only square that's available for it. 6's live up there, therefore. This is, I mean, again, it's just stunning. It's stunning. The 7 or the 8 is bounding the 4. So whatever we put in this square has to be a low digit. It has to be lower than a 4. So it's got to be a 2 or a 3. You can't really see that, but it does have to be a 2 or a 3. And now the 7, 8 pair rule this square out from being a 7 or an 8. So there are only 2 squares in this box that can be 7 and an 8. They are these 2. This one must be a 2 or a 3. So now there's a 7, 8 pair in this column and a 2, 3 pair in this column. And there's a 6. There's a 6 in one of those 2 squares, which has to be bounded. We have to bound the 6 on the high side. Well, we can't bound it with a 7 or an 8 anymore because the 7 and the 8 are not available. Therefore, the only cell that's higher than a 6, or the only digit that's higher than a 6 that could go and bound this 6 in one of these 2 positions is a 9. There is a 9 in one of those 3 squares. That means this is a 1. Oh, good grief. This must be a 9, therefore. This must be a 1. That must be a 9. So there's a 5 in here. This is important as well. Look, this red region now, the lowest digit in it is this square. Whether this is a 2 or a 3, it's the lowest digit, so it must be next to the 6 in order to make the clue work. So this must then bound the high side. That must be 9. This must be 5. 9s, 9s. There's a 9. Oh, 9 in one of those two cells. What now? Sorry about this. I'm stuck again. Bobbins. What is it I'm meant to be spotting here? This one, that looks okay. Ah, 6 here, there you go, there's something. We can get a 4 out of those squares. Oops. That can't be a 6 either. So this is a 7 or an 8. Oh, it was going so well. These two squares have got to be 1, 2 or a 3. Look, there's a 2, 3 there. We still need to place a 1. We know this 20 cage, that's growing, isn't it? It needs to be bounded on this side in one of those two squares. So we know this is an 8 cell 20 cage, so it's only missing 1 digit. It's missing 1 digit. So the lowest digit in this 20 cage is either a 1 or a 2, because the 1, it's not possible for the 1 and the 2 to be missing. So either there is a 1, there's a 1 or a 2 in one of those squares. So if there's a 1 or a 2 in one of those squares, what does that mean? So if this extended, there's a 1 or a 2 in one of those squares. Sorry about this, I'm trying to get my head around this, struggling. So if there's a 1, there's a 1 or a 2 in one of these squares. But I still don't know what's missing from the cage. Maybe that's what I've got to work on. What's missing from this cage? Ah, so if the cage was like this, you couldn't put a 4 in it, look, because of the 4s here and here. So if this was the cage set up, there could be no 4 in this cage. So this would have to be a 1 or a 2. These squares would have to be 2. Yeah, they'd have to be 2, 3, or 6. No, 2, 3. There's no 4, is there? I keep forgetting that. So, if there's no 4 in this, there must be a 1 here. These would be 2, 3, and 6. That plonks a 6 here. So this looks plausible, doesn't it? This does look plausible, because now I can fill this 11 cage with 3 and 8. So I've got to figure out how to think about this more logically, I think. Let me just go back here and try and figure it out. So if there must be the 1 look in this top box can't be, we can't put a 1 in the center of the 11 cage because we know these 2 cells are what's summing to 11. The 1 must be in one of those 2 cells. Now, does that matter? So, feel like this is important, but I can't quite get my head round why. If it goes this way, this has to be a 1 or a 2. Ah, that's it, I've got it. If it goes this way, this has to be a 1 or a 2. So this has to contain the digits in some order. There has to be a 3 and a 6 here. Now the 11 cage is impossible, because the 11 cage can't be 2, 9, it can't be 3, 8, it can't be 4, 7, it can't be 5, 6. So this square here, there would be no option to make those 2 add to 11. This is not the shape of the blue region. So we are off and running again. What we can do now is say with certainty this bends. And now I can use my for logic. There's no for. There's no for in this shape. So it must have a 1 in it. The 1 must bound it. That's the 1. This is 2, 3, and 6 now. And again, I've got to be careful. I can't make these squares 3 and 6 because then I won't have any way of making those 2 add up to the right number. So there must be a 2 in one of these squares. We know this is, in fact, we know this one is the 6 from the fact there's a 6 here. So there's a 6, 2, 3. This is a 3, 8 pair. And this is a 7. This is an 8. This is a 7. This is an 8. Hang on. My daughter's crying. Just 1 second. Hi, sorry, we just had a tap incident, so everything is fine. Now, where was I? I have to remind myself. What was I doing? Oh, I was filling in 7s and 8s down at the bottom because I can't remember why I got that, but anyway, 7s, 8s here and here. What does that mean? 7 there, that gives me some more Sudoku. 7 and 8 there. Oh yeah, I remember I'd got this sorted out, hadn't I? So I need 1, 5 and 9 to complete column 3. That's not 1, that's not 5, that's not 9. And now the 13 cage now, look. The 13 cage now has a 1 or a 9 at the centre of its galaxy, or close to the centre, part of its centre. So let's start wondering about this. So it's going to have to be at least a 6-cell galaxy then. I can't really see how to work out what it looks like. What are those 2 squares? 5 and 7. So there's a 7 in one of those 2 positions. 5, 7, 8. Gosh, it was all going so well, and now I've ground to a bit of a halt. So the galaxy, maybe this galaxy. How do we get a handle on this galaxy? I know how to get a handle on it, of course. I say of course as if it was right there in my brain. It's not been right there in my brain, as you've seen, but I have now got it. This 11. I've made these add up to 11, but I've not put the galaxy boundaries in. One of the boundaries to an 8 must be a 9. So the 9 here fixes which way round this 11 goes. It's got to be in one of those two squares. So, and in fact the other one has to be a 2, doesn't it? Because, or a 1. Oh, it can't be a 1. So it has to be a 2. So one of these is a 9, which means one of those is a 2. This 9 here sees that 9. Therefore this is a 9. Oh, that was less good than I thought. I was sure getting the edges of this one would be useful. Oh, sorry, that's not been as good as I was hoping for. The 15 cage now. Right, okay, well the 15 cage now can't be a 4-cell galaxy because it can't have a 9. We can't put a 9 orthogonally next to this domino. And if we're going to make a 4-cell galaxy where these two squares sum up to 15 themselves, we would have to be able to put a 9 in either of these, somewhere in the yellow squares, and we can't. So this galaxy can't be a 4-cell galaxy, so it must be a 6-cell galaxy. I'm assuming it can't be an 8-cell galaxy. No, it can't. So it's got to be... It can never take a square in any of those. So it must take this square. So it must take this square. So this is the shape of this galaxy. Good grief. I'll make that orange. Now, what can we do with that? We can say that there must be a 7 in one of these 3 cells here. We can say that there must be... I'm not sure what else we can say actually. What do I need to complete this box? I need 2, 3 and 7. Those aren't 6 anymore. So the 3 goes up. The 3 goes up here by Sudoku. So this is a 3, 7 pair. So this is a 2. That is important. That's going to fix this galaxy for me. It must go this way round. That's going to be important, surely. That's not 2 anymore. 4, 5 and 6. So there's a 5 up there in one of those two squares. This has to be a 4 or a 6. Oh, the 5 here, look, sees that square. That's got to be a 9 now. That's got to be a 1. That's got to be a 5. That means that's got to be a 9, look. And that must have... yeah, it does. That has profound implications for the 13. Why? Because the 13, we know, has to be at least a 6-cell galaxy, but it mustn't bump into any 9s anytime soon. It's already got a 1 in it. So if it does this, the 1 and the 9 are adjacent, and this clue should be a 0. If it hits this, we'd have to put 13 into one cell here. That's not possible. So the only thing this can do is bend like that, initially anyway. Now it can't bend here. It can't come here, so it can't take that square. It has to do that. So it's sort of a W pentomino with an extra cell in it. Where does 1 go in the central squares now? This 1, it sees that one. It's part of the same galaxy. It can't be here. It can't be in any of those squares because of this one. This square here is a 1. Oh, 1, 1, 1, 1. We're off and running again now because that's got to be a 1. and that is in the 15 cage, and that's so the 1 and the 9 bound 15 cells, or cells sum into 15. Those two squares can only be 7 and 8, therefore. That's not 7 anymore as a result of that. This square must be a 3, that must be an 8. Where do we put a 5 in column 9? Can't put one there, so it must go here. That means that's a 5 by Sudoku. That fixes the 5 and the 7 at the top there, look. Those squares are 1, 4 and 6. The 13, how are we going to make 13? Yes, this is good. The 13 has to go into those two squares, which can't be 5, 8 and can't be 4, 9, obviously. So these are 6 and 7, which... bobbins, doesn't work. That can't be a 6. So this square, therefore, has to be... this has to bind the 6 and the 7, so it has to be higher than a 7. It can't be a 9. This is an 8. Seven here for 6 and 7. I don't know how I didn't see that 7 straight away. That is what Undar Beyond's puzzles do to you. They bamboozle you. The 7 must go here by Sudoku, because the 7 can't go here because there's already a 7 in the spiral galaxy. That fixes the 7 and the 3. These two squares must be a 3, 4 pair, I think. So these two squares must be a 2, 8 pair, and we can fix it. 8 here, 2 here. Now, we must have almost used all of our galaxies now. 2, 3. There's got to be a 2 in one of those squares. So there's got to be a 2 in one of these squares. This square can't be a 9. I don't know why that's still pencil marked. 4, 5, 6 here. The 6 here fixes the 6 at the bottom. Four, 5 pair there. Still can't quite determine which way round that goes. 3, 4 pair here. Again, same problem. There's no 8 in those two squares though, so this forms a 6, 7 pair, which is now resolved. Now look, we're going to get some joy along the bottom row. We need to place 2, 3 and 6. But this has to be the lowest digit of the triumvirate, because it must bind the 4, of course. So this has to be the 2. That means that one is a 3. No 3 over there anymore. So we still need to place 2 and 4 into these two squares. Therefore 3 and, what's that, 3 and 8 into those two. We can at least do that one. 8, 3. Must be a 3 in one of these. It's still holding out. Stop holding out, puzzle. That square's got to be a 4. That might be helpful, because that's going to fix the 4 and the 3 over there. Those two maybe? 2 and 6? Nope. So those two have got to be 3 and 5. At least that's resolvable. That fixes 3 and the 6. That fixes the 6 and the 2. The 2 and the 4. The 4 and the 5. Now, maybe we're about to finish. These two have to be 3 and 4. Of course, that is useless. And these two, although maybe the 3 is it? Yes, the 3 gets placed here. That is important. 4, 1, 1, 2, 2 here. This square should be a 6. Check. Yes. Wow. Another piece of brutal genius from Undar Beyond. Oh dear, that was hard. Let me know how you got on in the comments, and yeah, do think about us on Patreon. Anyone who can support us there, we are extremely grateful. Thanks for watching.